Welcome to the 100 subscriber Q&A. I only got one question, so we can spend a lot of time on it. These Q&As tend to last about an hour, so with one question, we'll give it a good hour. And it was, can you expound on the research that you did concerning the relationship between DNA and thought? And so I found the connection between DNA and thought about a decade ago, maybe more. It was in kind of a moment of stillness. I was working in a molecular biology lab and I just sort of saw the pattern. And it drives you, it would drive you crazy, right? To know that, to see that. So many different theories of biology is all kind of coming together, and it agrees with all the common sense and all the different spiritual traditions I can find, is how I've been like fact checking this between, because like it came to me through the framework of molecular biology. Like molecular biology is the application of scientific materialism to life. So you're thinking of life as with that physics point of view of it's atoms, it's balls, it's these things with shape. And so these balls chain together, nitrogen, carbon, oxygen. It makes fat, it makes proteins, it makes all these structures. Like molecular biology is like down to the like analyzing the structure of biology to the tiniest form. That's what I was trained to think of the world in that way. So it's like when we're talking about, well, what are you talking about when you talk about DNA? And it's like, oh, it's shaped like this. It does this. It's in this location and it's got this shape. It has these electrical properties. It moves through the gel. It's actually made of electrons that are in a cloud that tend to hold a particular shape. Right, I had learned all of these thoughts about reality, the molecules. And so it's these positive charges, this skeleton, a positive skeleton surrounded by an electrical body. Like that's what the substance of the body is in the framework of atoms and things like that. Like when we look at things at the molecular level, it's like a charge, and then these charges link together, bound to each other, like with their like electrical flesh, and that's what creates like a molecule. So yeah, fats, proteins, DNA, the cell membrane, you can see it, you can look at it as these structures. It's fat. Right? It's all tied together. It's all thought. So the cells, like if you look at the cells of the body, it's fat, and those are these chains of these balls, these atoms, these clouds, really, not really balls, but it's like a structure. They're structures, and they're like kind of this shape. So there's some chains that are called fats, the way they behave. It like fats repel water, kind of. I don't know, just look them up. There's all this sorts of stuff on just Wikipedia. Like it's like, what's a fat? Like, oh, it's that. And it kind of has this shape. And so you get a picture of this ball that we would call a cell, and it can be lots of different shapes. Skin cells, nerve cells, like eggs, sperm, the original germ cells, not the embryonic cells, like they're just circular, right? So the structure of those things in molecular biology terms is, it's a phospholipid bilayer, they call it. So it's like a fat, and one end of the fat is more, it's got a different charge. And that's just the shape of things. Like that's the known shape of things. Like when you dig into it, it just takes that shape. You can look at it with like a microscope. And then you can take any piece that you're looking at in the microscope and look at it even closer. You can look at it under an electron microscope, or you can look at it, you can take it apart to the atomic level and just look at the nitrogen by itself, and it's like, that gives you chemistry. So everything's made of that in this framework, in this style of thinking. So you have the cells, and then on either side of the cell is two charges. The inside of the cell is negative, it pumps negative ions in, the outside of the cell is positive. So you have this fat layer, and then it separates two water layers. One side of the water is positive, the other side of the water is negative, and they're stuck together like that. So like the surface of the subunit of life has this it's like a shell or a unit of polarity. When the cell's alive, the whole thing is charged, the outside of it. The only reason I'm saying this is because, like, when we talk about DNA and thought, it's like, well, what am I talking about when I talk about DNA? And it's like, oh, I'm doing something that I'm sensing through my body. So you're talking about like a perception. And it's like, also, what are you talking about when you talk about DNA? It's like, it's at the very core of your existence. It's at the very, 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 very core of your existence, the most central thing. So this pattern that you see, like the charges and how everything's behaving, like if it's true, like when you look at thought, you should be able to see this same basic pattern that I'm talking about. Because the DNA is like right here in our perception. And so how does the thought tie into that? So the first thing I noticed was that, so you have the whole body comprised of these fat balls, basically cells, charged, electrically charged little fat balls, little sacks of water that have like, the surface waves, and so it's charged as well. All living cells have this like negative polarity on the inside. They're more negative on the inside than the outside. I think I might have that reversed, but I don't think I do. And so within the body, the nervous system is constantly sending out all sorts of crazy pulses, and so is the heart. So when a nerve fires, the one end of it sets off and it goes, down the nerve. It doesn't, it's like a signal, and it's the as it travels along the nerve, it's a really long cell. It's called myelination. You can look up anything that I say. It's like standard 101. The nerves are myelinated, and so that causes there's an electromagnetic explosion at every little juncture down the nerve. It's like insulated little gap, insulated little gap, insulated little gap, insulated little gap. And so every time the little electromagnetic signal gets to a gap, it goes off there and then jumps to the next gap. And this is happening anywhere from like 1 to like, I think maybe 100 times a second. I forget how fast the nerves can actually send those bursts. It's like somewhere on the magnitude of like, yeah, 1 to 10 per second. Maybe 1 to 100, I forget. But that's going on. Also, all the nerves, everything that the nerves is doing, that's constantly how everything's firing back and forth. And so that explosion is going off in an electromagnetic environment. All the cells in the body are sensitive to this sort of thing. So as that goes off, you're going to see ripples along the surface of the cells, and then as anything in the body pulses electrically, it's going to send ripples through the electrical medium. Like, we know that's happening because we know that's how like electricity works, and we know that electricity works like really similar to water. So basically, as things go off in there, we know that the electricity is splashing. Sending ripples to itself, and it's doing this on the surface of the cells. And so there's all sorts of machinery and proteins embedded in the surface of each cells that like do all sorts of work. And so as this electrical activity waves by, it actually powers like what's happening on the surface of the cell. So as the nerves go off and they're sending this pattern, they're going off in a particular pattern that's causing a particular kind of frequency of ripple on the rest of the whole body, along with the heart. Like every time the heart goes off, you know there's electromagnetic ripples all through all the charged surfaces in the body. And so that provides the screen upon which you perceive reality, like one layer of it. So then all the nerves firing that way, it's like, oh, where you're looking into the electromagnetic ripple, and the electromagnetic ripple is real. It's doing this exactly. Right? It's just an ephemeral ripple. It's a splashing on the surface of reality, but it's like exactly this. So the nerves are real. Like sense perception and sense data is real because of how it operates. It's not taking data in. It's an all at once the way you're looking at it, and it's all of those ripples all at the same time. So that's how the brain creates the pattern of self. And like, so you can look in there at certain frequencies, certain ripples or whatever. So like obviously up here, this is crazy. There's a lot of like very high fidelity electromagnetic, like, and like down here, it's kind of like just moving, like ripples go a long way. It's like deep ocean. It's like you have everything in you from the deep ocean to like computer mainframe. But it's all fundamentally the same thing, and it's like legit real. So it's like you do have thoughts, you do have a body, and it's all that. And so then that rippling pattern that's happening in the body is real. The body, you could think of it as the protons, right? Like the actual, the structure, the framework within which the ripples are happening. it's like the life, the sense state or whatever that's that charge separation. The like anything with that charge separation can conduct, perception or consciousness, sort of like anything in the body that has that charge. Anytime you have a magnetic pulse, all the electrons, the cloud is going to distort and wiggle exactly the way that water does when you throw a rock in it or set off an explosion. And so it's like the nerves going off at that pattern, it's causing constant like digital explosions in the ripples, and it's tied into the sense phenomenon. But it's not a virtual image. It's like it's just this ephemeral, shimmering whatever. It's like you could say it's a virtual image is created by perception, but the body, the structure is actually really there. The substrate, like the core of the atom, the electron cloud ripples, but the core of the atom is just there, and then all that movement is just a ripple, and this thing doesn't move at all. Like that would be the reality, and it's like that's there. So the cool thing with thought is like when people are like, can you know truth through the sense organs? And it's like, yes, obviously. It's real. Not that ripple effect, but it's right, the reality is right there. Like these slow ripples moving through us are day and night cycles. It's wild. And they're real. And so normal thought is all on that level. And it's like, it's super meaningless. Thought is like a ripple. Normal thought is like a ripple with no body. And it's a movement. It's like a wave that has no body, whereas like a real wave has like some substance to it. Like a lower level thought has very little substance to it. It's just an informational pattern moving across the wave. It's not like a big tsunami or a current or anything. Like if you get, so another pattern I noticed, like when I started to study thought, was I was like, okay, so let's dissect what's the smallest possible object you could ever conceive of. And it's like it comes down to whatever it is, it's that object plus your thought that you're having about it, because that's the only thing that you could ever study. So the smallest possible object is to cut off the object, and obviously anything that you're going to have is going to be thought plus the object, so why not just get rid of the object? And so like the smallest piece of matter, the smallest possible thing you could ever possibly study is thought. And it's because it's that smallest thing, it's like that's the thing that we're actually bouncing everything off of to see it. The way that with an electron microscope or with photons, you're bouncing photons off stuff to see it perceptually. Like thought is what you use to see that. And so I had to dissect it, and so the only thing you can dissect thought with is more thought. So I dissected thought to find the anatomy of thought. I think I wrote a book or something called The Anatomy of a Thought Object. I have some documents. It basically goes down, what does it take to have a thought? You have to have the thought itself. The thought exists somewhere, so it has an environment. And then there's something between the thought and the environment that is neither the environment nor the thought. So to have any object, and even a thought object, because this is the nature of thought, so this is the nature of everything that you apprehend through thought. Because you're using thought to apprehend it. So the structure and the pattern of thought makes it so that everything else conforms to that structure. So that's those metaphysical patterns that you see. So the first thing that pops out is that it's a trinity. It's three things. Everything is three things. So a thought, you can't have a thought that is not in an environment that's not it. Like whatever you would conclude, that's all other thoughts. It's everything behind it. It could be empty, whatever. It exists. So it's like you're outside of it. Like you have the thing itself, and then there's obviously some sort of boundary, some sort of condition, some sort of thing that separates the thought from what it's not. Which you look at it, and the only thing capable of separating an object from the environment is thought, right? So you look at it again, and you go, okay, the environment is these three things: is the environment, the middle thing, the thought, and then the like the focus. So you look at this thing. These two things they kind of are these other three things, but this one can't be either of these two. So you have to look at it and be like, well, what is this made of? Like you can dig into each part of the Trinity, and it's like the duality references itself again, and then when you dig into the middle part, it opens up another Trinity. And lo and behold, you'd think this would be recursive, but it does it 3 times. So you have the object, not the object, and then everything else, the sort of energy separating them. You look into the energy, and the energy basically, the energy separating the object opened up into like force and time, something like that. And then when you open it up again, it very much had a similar structure to like light and mass. It was like 80% similar to the standard model. Like it looked like everything. It looked like the results of everybody's results, because it was like, oh yeah, we have to think this way. So it was pretty interesting. And so it opened up 3 times, and then it got to like void, and it got to this thought that you couldn't. It's like you can't go any further. You just can't. There's no way to comprehend it. Like it can't. You just can't go any further. And so that creates one subunit. And the subunit has this like very intangible thought at the top that like overlays and connects. Like philosophically, there's like a philosophical chain, like all of the stuff that people have done with like, I don't know, almost like the Kabbalah, the Tree of Life, personality structures. Like you can go into it at the thought level, and the thing has this like triple trinity structure that has 4 subunits. It splits apart into like 4 different categories, just like DNA, and then it has this chaining effect where you can chain them together. And so thought has this like actual, like when you dissect thought, it has a homologous structural identity, like it's identical to DNA structurally. Like the philosophical structure, I'd have to get my papers back out to work my way through it, but the symbolic gesture of all the categories that are created when you dissect thought like this recursively, when you recursively think about itself, like when you do that very precisely and you record what's happening, it's structurally identical to DNA, which was wild. And so DNA, when we study it, seems to be emanating. It's like radiating this code that's causing all of the carbon, the nitrogen and the water and everything to swirl together and then it forms into this reality. So like this reality, the world within the perceptions are happening, is coming. There's like an environment, and the environment somehow coming in contact with the DNA, which is in the center of these charge bubble things, and it like orchestrates and networks with each other, and it swirls all of the breath and everything together, and it creates bodies. Like you could see, like the DNA seems to be like the control unit of the whole shebang. It's like what's transferred between lineages and between lifetimes. Like it's like this. It's consciously like almost immortal. Sections of it are anyway. Like it mixes up and dies at a deep level. Like when you make sperm or egg cells, things get mixed up. So it's not even chunks of DNA that stay the same, but like it's codes and notes. Anyway, so it's a charged rope. Like back to the molecular biology thing of it. It's it's got all these like phosphoruses. What's a phosphorus? It's a positive core vibrating in a certain way that creates an electron cloud around it that's a particular shape, and it accepts electromagnetic waves, and it also can support current. Like so, in these electron clouds around atoms, they shimmer and they ripple in response to electrical waves, just like you see it happen directly with water. Like water is the electrical wave, like fractally kind of manifested up a little bit. It's like that's how it moves when it can move freely. Electron clouds. So electron clouds want to move like that, but they're stuck to the atom via what seems like some sort of cymatic resonance. Like it vibrates in a particular way, and that, like when you play a note over water and it causes the water to form a pattern on the surface, like in waves. It seems to be that's what causes the electron clouds of particular atoms to take a particular shape. So they're kind of held in place with that vibration, and then they link together that way, and then they conduct any sort of electromagnetic disturbance. We're not gonna be able to see it from this level, but what's happening down there. There's no way it doesn't. There's no way that it's impossible for this to not be going on based off of like what we know about reality when we study it with like science. Yeah, so the DNA has this molecular structure. Go look it up, and that's this cymatic shape vibration of like electrical clouds in this double helix formation, and it obviously all of that electricity is picking up, and then it's coiled in this. You couldn't make a cooler electrical coil. Like if you wanted to make a squirrel cage induction motor or some sort of crazy fractal antenna, like this is how you would. There's no way that it's the way that the DNA is coiled. There's no way that it doesn't act like an antenna. And it's such a crazy dense antenna, it's probably receiving quite a bit of energy, similar to how like wireless cell phones charge. It's impossible for that not to be happening. Just based off of like when you look at it, it's nothing but electricity, and it's just coiled and coiled and coiled and coiled and coiled and coiled. And it's wrapped in a charged sphere, like a hypercharged sphere, the nucleus. It's super, super charged. And then it's strapped to like organelles like mitochondria with like webs of like connective tissue or microtubules. Like, so it's like, it's strapped, and these things are also heavily, crazy charged. All they do is create charge. They just rip charge off of protons and electrons. It's just these factories that are like ripping electricity out of atoms and storing it. And then that electricity gets put into different molecules and so it's this huge electrical operation. The whole cell is that. And then at the middle of all this crazy electrical stuff is the DNA, which is like sending out codes. So, we get from this world, you get mRNA, messenger RNA. So that's what people see as like angels, other entities. There's this whole world of there's this RNA world that's like holding the vibration for this sensory world, the same way that the nucleus of an atom holds the vibration for the electrical cloud around it, the electron cloud around it. Our DNA holds the vibration to keep the world at a particular shape around it. And it creates the world via messengers, which go out and they send it. It's like code from the DNA, and it gets stepped down into protein, and then the proteins get integrated into the world. Right, the thing that controls the world never actually comes out into the world. It sends like things that are like half. They're like it. It's like angels are like God, but not really. God's like double-stranded DNA. Angels are single-stranded RNA. Angels and demons, right? Viruses, parasites. So there's parasitic beings of the DNA level, like evil. It has no life of its own, right? So this is kind of how evil is known to work. It's like that genetic code. It has no life. It can't incarnate and become a living thing, nor is it DNA. Like, nor is it capable of living. So it's like rogue DNA, right? So most of the DNA is just normal RNA sent out from the DNA. The RNA goes and it makes a protein, or it makes the world. Like particular types of RNA code the cell to build a body and to do all sorts of stuff. And so just the degree to which, like, you notice your thinking, how it affects like what you do. Like if you're at a sporting event, like how are you thinking about it? You'll notice that that affects how the world goes out. So that's how, like, in how this is happening is largely dependent on what your DNA is doing. Like entirely dependent on what your DNA is doing. Like if you're stupid, smart, talented, athletic, dumb, beautiful, ugly, that's all dependent on what your DNA is doing. 100%. And it's like you look at it, it's all kind of tied together. And so you realize it's like the degree to which you're identified with like sense perception is the degree to which you're divorced from true thought, which is the true self, which is the DNA, which is the scaffolding under reality. It's not reality itself. It's like the degree to which you're coming from this location of like, oh, here's me. It's like the degree to which your thoughts are vacuous, and the degree to which you're like see through that character to the true self. Then the thinking, I think, is like very powerful alteration of the DNA expression. And so when people are doing like mantras and repetitive exercises, they're attempting to like force the DNA to change. Like, I'm going to work out so hard that it stimulates muscles. You do like mantras and prayers and stuff like that, and it's like you do it so hard that it stimulates some sort of attribute coming out from it. Like, so it's different types of like worship is trying to get the DNA to respond. Then you can like force it to respond with drugs, right? You can force it to respond with threats, with violence, with seduction. You can force the DNA to change and respond. And ultimately, it's like only if the identity shifts to that of the DNA, you choose to be what you're doing, rather than doing what you're doing to force yourself to be a particular way. You move from that deeper place, and then the thinking becomes the DNA, becomes the expression, and like that's different. And you would never like. That would be impossible for anybody to be themselves. So yeah, that's kind of the big. Oh, that was only 30 minutes. That's kind of how thought, I think, relates to DNA and sort of a fractal antenna, and like all of that is kind of like, yay. I actually got more interested in water. It's like the simple, it's like that molecular biology thing is like very it's just shimmer. The whole thing's just shimmer. And so just using like fluid mechanics and other stuff like that is a lot simpler, even in terms of understanding consciousness. It's way easier to understand your consciousness as the water, which is shimmering the same way that like the DNA and all the other crazy shit is. Exact same shimmer, super simple. It's just water. Whereas the other one is like this infinitely complex hell realm, which is like these dichotomies in reality. It just pops up over and over and over again. So yeah, I like stopped being all that interested in the molecular biology one because the water was like a more simpler, powerful reference frame for what I was trying to do. Which is like, yeah, if you're trying to move from the DNA, well, it's like, well, what is the DNA in? What can you actually push off of? What's actually going on? Like, how can I actually move? And it's like, well, everything's in water. So at that deepest, most basic level of being, you're swimming. And if it's not in the water, you're swimming in the electron cloud. So it's like swimming consciousness is real. And the other one is like from a, yeah, I don't even know. Okay.